Hi, my name is Cal, Yoga and the Big Smoke, and I'm going to give you a 30-minute video on Yin Yoga, and it's particularly for cyclists, concentrating on the quadriceps and the hamstrings. So for this first pose, we're kind of going to come into a half saddle, and a half saddle you can either do on your front or your back, and we're going to show the different variations. We're going to be here for 4 minutes each side. So do you want to come into half saddle? So the first version, which Tammy is doing on the left here, she's going to do it on the front, which is a little bit easier. And if you want to make the pose more intense, then you take a block underneath the knee and raise it up. Is that okay? Do you want more? So I'm going to give Tammy 2 blocks to make it a little bit more intense. You want to be feeling this on the front of the right thigh, or the left thigh, as Kieran is doing in this case. So he's got a bolster underneath his back, his leg is straight. You have the options also of bending this leg up, and you can bring it out to the side. And you're working with the preference of the position of this leg. So how do you want it? Straight ahead? Okay. And then Nicola has chosen not to have a bolster for half saddle. She's lying straight on her back, and then she's finding this nice stretch here, and she's supported her knee with her foot. So this is just another way of this leg assisting you in the pose. The idea is to find this really nice stretch through the front of the thighs, through the quadriceps, 4 quadriceps on the front of each leg. And then you're going to start to work a little bit up into the front of the hip as well. One of the quadricep muscles also crosses over the hip joint. And then in Yin, we're working on this fascia, so bands of fascia all around the thigh, and that will work up over the front of the hips and into the torso as well. So you're going to be stretching this thicker, denser tissue of the quads and around the quads as well. Okay, so when we're working on the quads, we are working on the fascia surrounding the quads, as well as the fascia goes in between all the muscles, around the muscles, and then layers and layers are actually around the big group of the quadriceps. So the idea behind Yin is to stay in these poses for long periods of time, and that starts to release this denser tissue of the body. It's a little bit like moving teeth, that you have braces on teeth for a long period of time, gentle applied pressure, and that will gradually move the teeth. A little bit like the fascia, we want to stretch it out. So the idea is to hold these poses for a while in order to open up this dense tissue of the body. Okay, so we're going to come straight into the other side. So Tammy's still going to continue to use the blocks on the other side, on the front ways, as she bends her knee back and brings the blocks underneath, getting a nice stretch through the front of the left thigh. And Nicola and Kieran are choosing to do the same variations on this side. So obviously the body's not the same either side, so you can choose to do slightly different variations. And remembering that with half saddle, you can use a bolster to prop your mid back up, which makes the pose a little bit less impactful on the lower back particularly. And then you can, if you start to getting a little bit of pain, so it's very easy to start to get pain through the front of the thighs, and you can move the leg out, and that will ease that little pull on the quadricep tendons at the front of the thighs. So Yin is very much based on Chinese medicine, and as we work through the different muscle groups, then we're also working through the different meridian lines or channels. And this front line working through the whole of the front line of the body is the spleen and the stomach meridian line. So this also helps in aiding digestion. And it really helps to calm the mind. It's connected to the earth element, which is all about grounding and coming down to the earth and feeling a little bit more connected. So less thoughts going round and round in the mind and more coming down into the physical body. If at any point during the pose you want to come out because it just gets really uncomfortable or it gets really intense, sometimes it can get physically intense, sometimes it can get emotionally intense, then just come out of the pose. There's no obligation to stay in the side for 4 minutes. 4 minutes is quite a long time for yin. You can stay in the poses from anything between a minute to 10 minutes. It's just coming up to a minute more on this side. In this pose too, you notice that Nicola has got her arms over her head, which can really help to open up the top of the front line of the body as well, or you can choose to have your arms by your side. Knowing that we're always working towards our own preferences. So as long as you're feeling the stretch, I always mention the target area in the yin posture. As long as you're feeling in the right area, then you're in the pose. It doesn't matter what it looks like. We're always thinking back to the function of the pose, and the aesthetics, or how the pose looks, is secondary. Okay, so very slowly coming out of that second side. And we're going to move straight into a pose which is going to work onto the hamstrings. So I'm going to take the first one. You're going to do your ham dangle. So you need to have a strap for ham dangle, and you need to have the strap so it holds, and then you're going to bring it around your head and your foot. So it's a little bit tricky sometimes to get the strap around the head, but once it's down there, then you're finding the right pose is at the right tension for you. Do you want it less?
That's good.
Okay, so one way of doing it, really nice, very relaxing, it really works on the hamstrings. The other way is you can do a forward fold. So 2 different variations of a forward fold. As Nicola folds forward, she's got her leg bent behind her, which is like a half frog. So this knee bending out can come all the way out, or it can come a little bit in. That angle is your preference. And then you can have a bolster over your leg to help yourself or feel a little bit more comfortable. Do you want another prop? And then Tammy here is going to do the classic forward fold, Janu Shavasana. So do you want to bring your knee in? Like bend your knee, yeah, and then fold over that one. And then folding forward for there. So a really nice forward fold as well. This knee coming out, if you find it comes up too much, then you can bring it straight out in front of you, or you can do Nicola's option, and of course there's always the ham dangle option. So this pose, there's lots of variations to work into the back line of the body. So we're working into the hamstrings, 4 hamstrings, which are the antagonist muscle for the quads, quadriceps, and they work in opposition. So hamstrings, they bend the knee back, and they bring the leg back behind the hip as well. And the quads do the opposite. They bring the leg forward and they serve to straighten the knee. So two really big muscle groups, either side of the leg, the antagonist and the agonist muscle. So hamstrings, they attach right up under the seat bones. So if you find that you get the stretch more into the butt cheek or by the sit bones, then you can bend the knee a little bit. And that's going to bring the stretch more into the belly of the hamstrings, and that's where you want it, into the belly of the muscles. And equally, you can bend the knee slightly in your forward fold. You can even have a little bolster underneath it or a block underneath it to make the bend a little bit more comfortable. And always looking in yin to be as comfortable as possible. So these are this is the same pose. It's working on the same muscle group, the back of the legs, the hamstrings. And if you don't come down as far as Tammy is coming down, then taking a bolster as a really nice prop to use. And you're always looking to make the pose as comfortable as you can. There's so many different variations that it's really hard to talk through lots of variations or all the different variations. But if you find something that really works for you and you feel comfortable in it and it's getting the stretch at the back of the hamstrings, then that's the pose. Okay, so now we're going to go over on the other side. So they're going to do the same variations on the other side. Hand angle, where you bring the strap into your foot and around your head. So the weight of your head is supporting the strap and keeping your leg up. Janushirasana, just where you have the knee bent out. So the leg, this left leg now is an external rotation. And then Nicola is doing the half frog, where actually this hip, this thigh bone, comes into internal rotation, which can be easier for some people. So it's really worth just having a play, forward fold with the other leg in external rotation, forward fold with this other leg in internal rotation. The different sides are just assisting you in the pose, and you're just finding that nice stretch through the back of the right leg into the hamstrings. Always looking for props to assist you in the pose. And then you're wanting to come into a place where it's not too much or not too little. So it's called the Goldilocks position. So you don't want to be coming into really pushing yourself into a pose, but you still want to be in a place where you're feeling the stretch. Yin Yoga is all about feeling the pose. We get out of our mind and start to feel the physical sensations of the pose. We want to feel the stretch, and that's a way of accessing our physical body. So hamstrings, when we're working on hamstrings, we are working on the back line. Back line, we're working on the kidney and the urinary bladder. So kidney and urinary bladder in Chinese medicine, the kidneys are responsible for giving us our yin and our yang energy. It's where all that energy stems from. So it's really important to keep them rejuvenated, to rest them. And there's this whole balance, a little bit like the yoga we want to come into. Not too much, not too little. We want to have this balance in our lives of rest and activity. And that's what the kidney energy is really concerned about. It really needs to be rested, but it needs to be active. A lot of the time in our modern day world, our kidney energy gets very easily depleted because we keep on going and going and going. We don't really give us the rest that we need. So yin is this perfect place where we can come down onto the mat and just rest. It's really not about being active. It's about coming into the other side, coming into the yin side, which is really hard for a lot of us to access. So a really big part of Yin Yoga too is coming into the rebound. The rebound you can do between each pose. You can do between each side of each pose. I'm just going to do a 1 minute rebound now after the forward fold, and then we'll come into the end rebound, which is Shavasana. But you can choose to do your rebound and often, as frequently as like. It's a really nice part of the practice where you start to really feel, it's really about getting into the sensations and really feeling how that long-held stretch has affected your body. Okay, so really slowly coming out of that pose now, and you're going to do your 1 minute Shavasana. So lying back, Shavasana is just about lying back onto the mat, bringing your feet mat width apart, arms by your side, or you can choose to bring your arms onto your torso. And this place of just being able to notice, place of observation. Okay, so from here we're going to come into a banana pose. So banana, Tammy and Nicola, you're going to turn around and do banana so your head is that way. So banana is really about opening up through the sides of the body. You bring your legs to the right and then you, yes. And then you bring your arms to the right. And then you can either choose to have your ankles hooked over one way or the other way. So Tammy's going to choose to have the left ankle hooked over the right when she goes to the left side. Arms are nice and straight. There's the option too of having your elbows bent. So when you have your elbows bent, you're going to have less impact on the muscle, which is underneath the scapula, the top of the scapula, and sometimes that muscle can really get inflamed, so bending the elbows helps or prevents the inflammation of that muscle. Kind of depends. Some of you are going to feel it, some of you are not. You know what I'm talking about if you feel it. And then Kieran has chosen to have his ankle, this left ankle hooked over, so you can do it the reverse, and it just gives the pose a slightly different feel. So banana is more about finding a whole stretch down the seams of the body, so the sides of the body, and you might get it up through the bit of the shoulder here, or you might get it down through the ribs, you might get it through the torso, through the obliques. You might come and get it through the front of the hips, through the hip flexors, or you might even get it through the back of the hip, so you get a nice stretch in the muscle that sits at the top of the back of the hip, the quadriceps laborum, and then you might get it down through the sides of the lateral sides of the thighs, and that's getting into the IT band. So IT band can get really tight in cyclists because you're constantly doing that hip flexion exercise. And then sometimes you might get it also down through the side calf muscles as well, the peroneals. The banana is one of my favorite poses. It's really nice to get this whole side body stretch. You really rarely access that stretch. And then also the action of bringing your arms over your head is getting into the upper body meridian lines. So the heart meridian line and the lungs meridian line. Heart and lungs work together. So each meridian line has an emotion, a smell, a sound, a time of year, a season associated with it. And the heart has the association of joy, the emotion of joy, and then the lungs, the emotion of grief. And it's the delicate interplay between grief and joy. And for Chinese medicine, it's really not about whether something's good or bad, whether we should be feeling or not. They are very much aware that we want to feel the whole reach of our emotions, and that if we don't express ourselves, if we contain ourselves, or our emotions are suppressed for a long period of time, then they start to create unease and tension and eventually disease or pathologies in our body. So they're really very understanding that emotions, they call emotions internal causes of diseases. Okay, so you're going to come over and move over to the other side on banana. So it's just a really simple adjustment. Sometimes with banana, you can get a little bit icky in the back of the hips. So you just need to make sure that you shift your hips over a little bit. Sometimes a nice rebound between sides can be to do Supta Baddha Konasana, soles of the feet together, knees wide. And then like any of the poses, you'll notice that one side you can laterally flex much more easily and much more readily than the other side. So there's this whole process of while we're doing the Yin Yoga practice, we start to see the differences between the sides of the body, where we hold our tension, where we find it, those places we find it difficult to move into. So banana, as well as working on the upper body meridian lines, you're also working on the side meridian lines, and this is the liver and the gallbladder. Liver and gallbladder, it's the expresses itself most readily in the season of spring, and it's all about growth and development. So the emotion associated with liver and gallbladder is anger. And anger is this forceful energy which propels us forward. And again, we like to label anger as negative in the West. But Chinese philosophy recognize it as it propels us, it moves us forward, it changes things around us. If we're frustrated, then we want to move the obstacle which is stopping us from getting to a place. We move around it or through it, or renegotiate. So this idea that anger is the precursor, it's the promoter of change. Okay, so you're going to come back into center, and then the last pose we're going to do for this little round is a pose where you use a block. So you need to get the block, and the block can either be this way round or the lower way round. And you're going to put it just underneath your shoulder blade, so it's a little bit tricky to get into it. And then you drop your head back. So with Nicola, she doesn't want to bring her neck too much into hyperextension, so she has a block to support it. You're going to... Then the other way, Tammy's going to also get a block and do it the tall way round, but she's going to drop her head all the way back. So she doesn't need to have another block. And then equally with Kieran. So a really good guideline for females is that you can just get that lower line of the block along your bra strap. So with a guy, it's a little bit more difficult to teach to that. But you just need to go kind of below, a little bit below the shoulder blades, and then arms come out. And this is a really nice pose. It's not so much a stretch, it's more about releasing the fascia in the mid-back. So the mid-back is really tight. There's lots and lots of layers of fascia through here. And we tend very much in our modern day world to hunch over. You know, when we're cycling along, we're hunching over. And it's really about drawing the shoulder blades together and back and opening up through the front of the body. So the hardness of the block, because you can obviously do this with the bolster, but the hardness of the block is going to start to compress into fascia, and another way to release fascia in the body is to compress it, like massage is pressing down into the muscle tissue, but also the fascia, and that's going to release the fascia. So the block is compressing into the fascia, which is going to release it. You're folding over it the opposite way that you normally hunch, and then your arm bones start to roll out. So it's just this very, very nice opening through that mid-back region, which has a real tendency to tighten up. And then being a little bit mindful in this pose as well, because it can bring lots of things up. You know, as we open up through that heart space, it can be challenging, it can make us feel vulnerable and exposed, but at the same time, it can make us feel connected and joyful. So all the poses we've been in 4 minutes each side, and this pose we're going to be in 3 minutes. And now coming out of the pose, so you just release the block away and come out. So we're going to come into final relaxation, coming into Shavasana. So Shavasana, sometimes it's really nice. Do you want to bolster underneath your knees? Bring a bolster underneath your knees, a really nice option. It just helps to release the lower back. Do you want a bolster or not? No. So your choice to have a bolster or not. And then also eye bags as well. Do you want my bag? Eye bag. Thank you. So eye bags are just a really nice way of blocking off the sensors and coming into your final relaxation. And then very slowly just coming out of Shavasana. So maybe deepening your breath, wriggling your fingers or your toes. And then bringing your arms over your head and giving yourself a really nice big stretch. And hug your knees into your chest. And then just drop your knees over to the right side, coming into fetal for a few moments. So waking yourself up really slowly. And then pushing your way up into a comfortable seated position. And bring your hands together in prayer. And raising your thumb knuckles to the center of your forehead. Namaste.